one very helpful and useful function for looping is range. And we can use this function to generate numbers. And for example, range 10 generates numbers from 0 to 9. So 0 and 9 are both included, so we end up with 10 numbers. The function accepts also start, stop, and step parameters, so basically we can call it out with 3 arguments. And start is the starting index. This is included, or starting number. Stop is ending index or ending number, but this is not included. So range 10 basically works the same as range starting from 0 and up to 10, but 0 is included and the 10 is not included. And if we are using only one argument, then it's treated as end index or the end number. So if I write range 10, then this is basically the same as range 0 and 10. And also the step, the default value for step is 1, so this is also the same as writing range 0, 10 and 1. But if we are happy with our default values, 0 and 1, then we can use only one argument. And often we do use it only with one argument. And you can see it's somewhat similar to slicing. So if you already have seen the slicing part for lists or strings, then you can see that this is similar. If not, then if you get to slicing, then you see that there's quite a lot in common with range function. So the function actually doesn't give us the numbers. It actually returns a generator, which means that the numbers themselves are not calculated when we call this function. So those numbers are not in memory. So if you compare it with list, for example, if you write a list, say shorter list here, then we have those 4 values in memory already stored. There's a probably variable, the variable points to a memory, and in the memory we have those 4 elements already stored. The range actually doesn't do that. The range is basically this is like it kind of declares that we want to have those numbers, but we get those numbers as we want them or as we require them. So here are some examples. So if we print out the range itself, it actually gives us also the result range. So there are no actual numbers inside. But if we want to see the numbers, then we can convert it into list. So if we do list range 4, then I will get 0, 1, 2, and 3. And as was pointed out, the element itself for the end or the stop value is not included. So we start from 0, we take numbers, and we end before the stop value. And you have to see that the range gives us only the integer values. So we get integer values. We cannot use range to get floating point numbers. So, and often we use the range function inside for loop. And here is an example. So if there is a for I in range, let's put 4 here, it's easier to go through. Now we could see it as there would be a list of numbers. And if we have the list of numbers, then what the for loop does is it takes elements one by one and then executes the body of the function. Currently it prints out the y and adds to total this I value, and the total is 0 when we start. And what happens is that it adds 0, 1, 2, and 3. We should end up with 6. Okay, in this example, the range is up to 10. Then we sum all those values, and we end up with 45. And this is basically the same as we would write, as I pointed out here. You very often want to have consecutive numbers. It would be very inconvenient to write them all down if we can use a shorter version as pointed here, the range. Especially if the value for range is, let's say, 1000, it would be very inconvenient to write all those numbers up here. As we saw that range generates numbers, or actually we can say that we can use this to get indices for a list, for example. As you can see, the numbers start from 0. This is the same as we start in the indices in list or string or other sequences. So it's actually really very convenient to use range when we want to operate with different data structures. So here's an example. There are 3 names, and the names are in the list, so there's a list of strings basically. And what we do, we use the range to generate the indices for this list. And what happens is there's names. Let's put first letters here. Harry, Harry, Hermione, Ron. Okay, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, they have the same first letter. And the loop itself is for I in range. Now, inside the range, we have to put the value. So there should be a stop value or the ending index or how many numbers we want to take. And to do that, we can use the length of the list. So we use len names. And then we can basically print out the I value of I and value of names at position I. Now what happens? The length of this list is 3. And the range 3 actually gives us basically values 0, 1, and 2. So we can say it is kind of a list, but actually it's not. The list range doesn't give us a list, but it gives us the values. So every time we execute this line here, we get one value out of this list. But those elements are not stored in memory, only the value which is taken is in memory. And as we can see, the indexes here for the names are also 0, 1, and 2. And now what happens? We print out I and names at position I. So first we print out 0 and Harry. Then we print out 1 and Hermione, and then 2 and Ron. So this is what happens with this code. And this is often used, that we use range with length of the list to get indices for this list. And then we can do whatever we want with the value I. Yes, the len gives us the length of the list, and with loop variable I, we get all the different index values. So as pointed out here, 0, 1, 2, which point to those indices for this list. And if the list is longer, then the length is larger, and then we get all the index values for this concrete list. And it's nice to see that sometimes it might feel strange why when we have range, let's say range 4, why the 4 is not included. So why we here have elements up to 3, but this is convenient for using for indices, because if the length of the list is 4, then the last index is 3 and it starts from 0. And also you should see that this value here indicates the length of the numbers, or how many numbers or how many times this for loop will be executed. And for example, if you just want to repeat something, then you can write it as for, let's say, I in range. We put 10 here, and then we can print out high. So if we just want to repeat something 10 times, then we can use range. And the value inside is, the argument value here is the number of times the loop body is executed.